Right. My vignette. Eden. I was devastated when I opened the envelope that often came from Paris with its distinctive creative handwriting addressed to Madame Juliana Ranicar-Breese, 164 Kensington Park Road, W11 2ER, GB. I knew it was from my Parisienne companion and lifelong friend Jean Eden. It would contain the inevitable clippings of British interest from French magazines, as well as an arty letter in thick blue Sharpie ink, always in French, as Jean hardly spoke English despite being an Anglophile. But tears cascaded down my cheeks when I read its context that January. He wrote he never wanted to have contact with me by phone or letter when I came to Paris next time. "Someday I may tell you why," he taunted me. The only regret he had was that he would have no more contact with my magical husband Martin, who he adored. But why, oh why? I had thought for quite a while that Jean, who was about 20 years older than myself, was going gaga. He would constantly moan about all the circus collectors, such as Dr. Bourg in Rouen and Jean Villiers, the puppeteer in Paris. "I will never contact them again," he would say, and then say, "It'll be you next," and I would laugh. Little did I know that I too would get the chop. No doubt he wanted to become a recluse and be left in peace. I had first met Jean Eden via the circus collector actor Roland Duranzier in the early 80s. He collected circus memorabilia, especially Bertram Mills programs. He also had a large Santa collection too. All his money went on acquiring more and more objects, memorabilia and ephemera. He was friends with all the important circus owners and collectors, such as Pierre Lévy, who met his Russian wife in a concentration camp during the war. Most were wealthy, like Lévy, who was a member of the famous Galerie Lafayette store family. We would be invited to see several circus collections. Soon I was collecting bronze three-cornered hat clowns with a poodle, which ended up on my mantelpiece back in London. First one, then two, then three. I was hooked, and I began to collect and hoard too, which killed my buying and selling spirit. I was becoming like my clients, a passionate collector. I tried not to mix business with pleasure. Hard with Jean, because over the years I had become fond of this complicated, unattractive man with a hare lip and an ingrained complex about being illegitimate as well as deformed. His father had been an Italian immigrant who had crossed over the border to Nice. He never spoke about his mother. Of course, after many years, I could no longer sell to him. I always brought him a clown object and a circus program every time I came to Paris. That was my problem. I eventually became friends with some of my clients, getting involved in their passion. Jean was a successful glove designer in the 1950s, working mainly for an Italian company in Hong Kong. He showed me some of his old sketches and proudly told me that the Paris Museum of Fashion wanted to buy his work. Then his client died, and suddenly he was out of work and gloves were no more the fashion. However, when I recently Googled Eden, nothing came up. I was given a published book of his poems with a dedication to me as his dear friend. They were too intellectual for me to understand, but I thanked him anyway, never telling him I couldn't understand their meaning. Jean walked everywhere so as to save on the metro fares so he could buy more and more. He also walked by night and experienced nocturnal activities in the bushes. Without fail, every summer he would go to the same hotel on Kerkina Island, Tunisia. He bragged how he would be followed by handsome young men. I visualized him being stabbed, as I knew most Arabs carried knives, and Jean liked to walk alone at night, living, as in Paris, on the edge. He told me he had a beautiful naked body and had been a professional artist model. I can't comment, as I never saw him naked. He would escort me to the gala performances of the Ranicar-Breese in Paris at the Cirque d'Hiver. After the show, everyone would congregate in the famous clown bar decorated with clown tiles in the Rue Amelot. Everyone knew him there because he designed all the fabulous costumes for Alexis Groos and also Marquis Pauwels from Belgium. That was why he was known from Paris, Monaco to Brussels for his exotic costume designs. I suppose I was his muse. Jean was the person I would call last thing every night when I was in my Paris studio. I would come to work 4 or 5 times a year when the Vieux Papier fairs were on to buy for the archive I had founded in London, Retrograph. An amusing story of Jean was in his flat. I have to describe it first. It was in an elegant building on Rue Troyon, 17th, way up on the dark, salubrious top floor, but beyond the floor with the lift. The salon was quite big, with a cubbyhole of a kitchenette behind a curtain. Impossible to cook, as we would have ignited the red velvet curtain. There was a mound of Christmas memorabilia with Santas piled high in front of an armoire with a beveled mirror reflecting the collection. Jean confessed he'd forgotten what lurked inside, as he hadn't opened the wardrobe for about 10 years. There were tables galore with objects, books and ornate boxes. French bullion posters, circus posters adorned the walls. Somewhere amid the chaos was a single bed beneath a shelf groaning with vintage games boxes. I had to give him one, as I was in the antique game and dexterity puzzles dealer between Paris and London, and had several empty large puzzle boxes after I had removed the contents for easier transportation back to London to sell to the passionate late collector Edward Horden. One night Jean was sleeping in solitary state in his little bed when he heard creaking coming from the shelf above containing the boxes. The noise grew louder. He instinctively jumped naked out of bed and crash wallop, the whole shelf crashed into the bed. He could have been killed or ended up in a memorable memorabilia coma. Another crazy story. Jean was given a few £1,000s in a brown paper bag for the next time he came to England to buy a miniature circus accordion handmade by a craftsman in England. This money was to be the deposit. Somehow he managed to lose the paper bag in the chaos of his flat. He never found it and thinks it went out with the rubbish. The bathroom was as big as the salon, housing a bathtub, but Monsieur went to the public bath for his ablutions. Why? Well, the bath was for storage. A plank across its circumference which housed boxes, books, magazines and God knows what else prevented Monsieur having a bath. The bathroom was full of bookcases and there was no room whatsoever for a naked body, no matter how beautiful it was. I've got quite a lot more. Do you think it should be part 2 perhaps? Because you're going to run out of time, aren't you? Dear, oh dear, I'm only halfway through. Sorry.